welcome back to Sincerely Self podcast. Today we are joined by a very exciting guest, Jennifer Whitaker. She is a spiritual director and also a life coach. So, Jennifer, give us a little introduction to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I love starting with the story that really was a catalyst to me becoming a feminine business mentor. Although I had no idea that that's the path that I was on. I found myself 20 years ago, actually, driving down this tree-lined, affluent neighborhood, like the street, and just in my beat-up Honda. I think I had duct taped the bumper to my car, and I was in one of the lowest points of my life. I was like dodging collection calls. I was in an emotionally abusive relationship and just at this really low part of my life. And I'm driving down this affluent tree-lined street and I see people coming home from work and they're driving into their driveways and they're greeting their loved ones. And I'm like, I want this. I want the beautiful home. I want the family. I want like the love and the community and all of this. And the moment I thought that, I heard this little voice that said, "You're too broken. You're too broken to have this." And that was a voice I always believed. But this time it was different. This time when I heard that voice, I heard another voice right after that that said, "You are meant for more." And in that moment, I knew that that was my soul speaking. And I knew that I had a choice. I could either continue to identify with the broken version of me, or I could identify with worthy and wealthy. And from that moment on, I chose to identify as worthy and wealthy. And every decision that I made going forward had to align with that version of myself. And very quickly, I ended up turning my life around and I became one of the youngest philanthropy executives in my field. I worked with Jane Goodall. I worked with global organizations around the world, working with the world's wealthiest people. And I had this beautiful 20-year career. Um, but over a period of time, I started to burn out and I was just like, oh my gosh, I need something more. I also felt like there was like this executive side of myself and then there was a spiritual side of myself and I wasn't merging the two. And so something felt like it was missing from my executive career. And so that's when I decided to intentionally follow the spiritual direction path. And I went on to study the divine feminine for 3 years and become a life coach. And so when I started my business, I was like, okay, I'm set. I've got like the rituals. I know how to do this. I have the strategy from all this, business growth. I had grown businesses to over $30 million. So I had the strategy, I had the rituals, and right out the gate, I had a very successful launch of my business. I was making six-figure months. But all of a sudden, I started burning out again. And I was like, what is happening? This time I studied the divine feminine. I have the rituals, I have the strategy. What's missing? And I realized that as powerful as my nature practices and my rituals were, they were magnetizing wealth to me. The strategy was creating wealth. So I was able to bring it in, but I wasn't able to do it sustainably. And I was like, how do I do this without burning out? And so I started looking for mentors that could give me like the feminine path to creating a business where I wouldn't burn out. Like, what is that secret ingredient? And I couldn't find anything. I found a lot of women teaching very masculine business strategies with maybe a few divine feminine rituals sprinkled in, but that's what I was doing. And it still wasn't sustainable. And I found myself during that time as I was just like burning out. And I'm like, do I need to burn my business to the ground? I was doing an equine, like a horse therapy session. So it's during the fall when everything's dying and falling away. And I'm nose to nose with this horse named Buddy. And all of a sudden, I heard him say to me, "I am you and you are me." And all of a sudden, I realized, oh my gosh, I am nature. You are nature. We're all a reflection of nature. Why am I not aligning my business with nature? And then I suddenly got this download of the feminine path to abundance is all about aligning our energy and our strategies and our rituals with the seasons. And as soon as I did that, I tripled my income working half the time. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm on to something. And that became the catalyst to my work now.
I love that. Your story is such a true testament, I feel like, to the way that you speak to yourself and the way that you view yourself. is the world that you're kind of going to see. As soon as you start seeing yourself as that successful person, that person who feels complete, feels like you're on the right path, you don't have that burnout, that's when things are going to start aligning to get you there.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying that that's easy. It wasn't easy
Mhm.
and it wasn't a linear path too. There was very very cyclical, like how I teach with the seasons, like there's ebbs and flows to that. But the practices that I have give us the ability to hold us through those spaces. So the way I like to share my work is I use the wheel of the year as a framework. And for those who aren't familiar with the wheel of the year, essentially it is a circle. And if you divide it into 8 sections, each one representing a turn of seasonal energy. So you're probably familiar with like the winter solstice and spring equinox and summer solstice. And we move through the energies, and every turn has its own energy. And so there are strategically things that we can be working on in our businesses that align with that energy. But additionally, like what you just touched on, when we work on certain aspects of our business, there are also limiting beliefs that come up when we work on different aspects of our business. And so I also have nature practices to help us move through those limiting beliefs and really embody the energy of that season so that we're not forcing ourselves through that or pushing ourselves through our limiting beliefs or pushing ourselves through unaligned energy. We have the framework to support us through that in a very easy and very simple and feminine way.
Yeah. So for those of us who are not familiar with like the seasons and the way that you can use it in your business, give us just a little rundown of how you've been able to do that.
Yes. So I love to start with January because I think January is like the season that we can all relate to. Society tells us right out of the gate, let's create some big, audacious, bold goals. But when we
Mhm.
look around, like everything's sleeping. Everything's still hibernating. There's a part of us that's like, oh, I don't really want to go back to work. Well, that's your body being really wise and telling you it's not actually time to set big, audacious goals. It's not time to start to exude all this energy. And that's actually the time to go inward and reflect on what has worked well in your business, what hasn't worked well, what you may want to birth into the world in this spring. What are some ideas that are kind of percolating under the surface? Who are you becoming? I do a lot of journaling around that and like really like going inward and being introspective. And then in February, when we see those first little sprouts of bulbs bursting through the ground, that's actually when we set our goals. That's when we start to plan out the year. And then in March and April, we start to create our offers because we look at spring and that's when we're bursting into new energy and we're birthing new life into the world. And so we're birthing our own offers. And so we move through all of that into the summer is like visibility and selling. And in the fall, we start to reap the abundance from all the efforts that we had sowed over the course of the year. And then we
Mhm.
move right back into winter, into an introspective. And so there are lots of different things that we can work on. But again, yeah, we look at nature as the framework. And I find the reason why that is so sustainable is because oftentimes, myself included, when I did a practice or a ritual, that was great, but that was like 15 minutes of doing a practice. And then I went back to my daily life, and then I go back onto autopilot, and all my old patterns just kind of surfaced and I fell into them again. But when we work with the seasons and we're looking at signs every single day and we're tapping into that every single day, it holds us accountable for every day making very sustainable and aligned actions throughout our business. And so I find that it holds us throughout the whole year versus for 15 minutes in a day. And then we're bouncing out of it again and then bouncing back in. It holds us sustainably.
Yeah. So where it being spring right now, kind of the season of the rebirth and all those things, for our business owners who are listening right now, what tips would you give them that they could start incorporating into their business for this spring season?
I would say that this is a season to really tap into your creativity. So what ideas did you come up with in the winter? Or what ideas are you saying, I really want to do this, but maybe not now? Well, now is the time. I would just say don't overthink it and just move with the energy, because when we overthink it, that's when we kind of have that bottleneck, but work with the spring energy and that will create less effort. Even if you're scared to do that, it'll kind of catapult you forward. So now's the time to be creating those offers, launching them, and also growing your community. This is the time for reconnecting with people. We've been inside, tucked away for a while. This is the time to really be doing the podcast interviews, networking. This is the time to be teaching in other people's programs or teaching workshops. It's really that time to be more visible and connecting with others as well. So those are the focus areas for spring.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you've been able to find different ways that you can elevate a business through just using the seasons. Because I think we overlook nature's hand in everything, just because we get so desensitized to it in a way. So, tying back to divine femininity and nature, what are the direct kind of correlations that you've been seeing?
Yes, absolutely. So our bodies are directly connected to the moon and the tides. And so by honoring the seasons, we're realigning with our feminine power. We're activating that. I think one of the biggest ways that we disconnect from our divine feminine wisdom and our power is by staying busy. And it is by staying indoors, by not going outside, by saying we're too busy to go outdoors. The moment we step outside, I've been doing some actually like experimenting with even EEG headbands that measure the brain waves as we step outside. And actually, within a few milliseconds, our entire bodies readjust and realign to the frequency of the earth, which actually makes us more magnetic to clients. That actually opens us up to being a creative and intuitive portal. And that is the essence of the feminine. And so, actually, just by stepping outside, we align with that feminine energy.
Yes, I love that. I think people talk a lot about grounding and grounding exercises, and I feel like that's such a huge correlation what you were just saying of how it makes us magnetic. It makes our energy. People can feel that if we're in tune with the earth. So, what are some grounding exercises outside that you would say people could do to start being more aligned with the earth?
Absolutely. I would say right now, particularly if we're thinking about the spring and creative energy and really like leaning into that, one of the things that I love to do is actually just taking a walk and looking outside. So I almost like even open my arms so it's in a receptive state and I look up at the sky, feeling really, really expansive. And that activates this creative nature within me. And even just simply by walking that way, I have downloaded ideas that have just been like, oh my gosh, where did that come from? I also love the practice of grounding by a stream. I had a client recently that I guided her to go by a stream because water is associated with the feminine. And so it activates our intuition. And she was feeling like really blocked around what to offer. And the offers that she did have, she felt like she had outgrown. And so I guided her to go sit by a stream and had her journal around a few questions. And she said that within 5 minutes, she had a completely new download for a new program. And she came to me in 30 minutes. We mapped out the strategy for that idea. And it was like 3 weeks later, she had that program filled. That is the magic of just like working with our feminine energy and the seasons, because it doesn't have to be complicated and it doesn't have to be hard. That's like the way to do it. It's not through force, but to be working with our energy instead of against it.
Yeah, I think people definitely overcomplicate the process a little bit or feel as if it should be a little more like restraining or a little more difficult to become in tune with. But I think the most difficult part of it is removing the blockages, removing the limiting beliefs around it so that you're able to kind of accept it. So, for our listeners who are maybe like pretty new to this kind of topic or idea, what would you say are some of the first steps to removing those limiting beliefs?
Yeah, I would actually just examine that belief of, is it true? That's the first question. Is this actually true? And 9 times out of 10, almost 10 times out of 10, it's not true. So then the next step is to look for evidence that it isn't true, whether that has been in your own life or in the lives of somebody else. I love using expanders, and expanders are people who have what you desire that you can kind of relate to, that gives you proof that what you want is possible. So, either looking to other people, whether you know them or whether they're a celebrity or whomever, looking to other people and then looking for evidence in your past life that, oh, no, it actually did all work out. Or that belief actually is false because I have proof that the XYZ happened, previously in my life. When you do that, you actually start to rewire your brain to believe that to believe the true belief. So often we are just relying on affirmations or some type of mantra or something. And they kind of work, but they're only going to work if there is some belief or some proof. So I like to have like the affirmation coupled with evidence that what that limiting belief was is not true. So we ask if it's true, we find evidence that it's not true, and then we back that up with a new belief or an affirmation or a mantra of what it is that you truly want.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned finding evidence in past experiences people have had in life because I think that is really what solidifies a belief, because it's your life. You have emotions attached to the memories. And so seeing like, okay, it did all work out in my favor, or things were aligned, it's like you have no denying it because you experienced it. So I love that you're like, use that as your evidence.
Absolutely. And then coupled with my rooted rituals practices is when we actually sit outside with nature, we see that our ancient wisdom that lives inside our DNA, we know this through epigenetics. When we're in nature, it is activated. And all of a sudden, we do align with the memories of lifetimes ago or our ancestors ago, or memories from previously in our lives of when it did work out, or that we do have the tools within us to move forward. So it helps us disprove those limiting beliefs too. So I like to couple the limiting beliefs tool with a nature practice as well. I find that to be most powerful.
Yeah, just using all of the senses. I love that. And I
Mhm.
think people overlook how almost malleable our brain is. Our brain doesn't really know the difference between what we're thinking and what's reality. And so we have a lot of control if we use it to help our brain realize what is something that we is a limiting belief, something that we've believed to be true, and something that is true. So I love that you use like the senses and memories to kind of help us overcome those and kind of boss our brain in a way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. So, Jennifer, the last question I kind of have for you is more turning back into like a business sense. What advice would you give to maybe a smaller business on the ways that they can use nature to kind of amplify their business?
Absolutely. When a woman first comes to me, one of the first things that we do is we look at her entire business suite. And so we map out exactly what she needs to do to have recurring, consistent income. So we make sure that her offers include something that is evergreen or something that is long term and consistent. So she has that recurring income. We look at her messaging, we look at her launch plans and all of the aspects of her business. And then we map that out to her lifestyle of like how many hours does she want to work. And then we also map that out to the wheel of the year. So I would have you, if you have your year long strategy, take that and look at each turn, each month. what is the energy that you embody? In the spring, how are you feeling? Are you feeling energized? Okay, that's the time to do your launches. In the summertime, what are you feeling then? And map every aspect of your business according to the energy that you are feeling for that month. And then all of a sudden, now you have this feminine roadmap to your entire business that aligns with your energy. So you don't have to be hustling and forcing and pushing through those blocks.
Yeah, using your almost your energy as a compass for your business and just being really in tune with your feelings and the way things view to you.
Yes. Yes, it's a fun
Amazing.
exercise and it's really eye-opening. I've had some people who said, "Well, I live in Ecuador and we don't have major fluctuations in the seasons." I'm like, it doesn't matter. This is not just about the external seasons. While that does impact things, and in Ecuador, there's a rainy season and a dry season, so the fluctuations might be a little less noticeable, but they're there. It requires us to go inward and really look at what's happening within our bodies alongside the external seasons. So just get curious and start to map that out and then aligning your business actions with that energy.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for sharing this insight with us. I didn't realize how much we could use the seasons in our business. So this was such exciting information for me. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks, Lexi.
Yes, so I will have Jennifer has a private mentorship page and also her Instagram and her website. So I will have all of those linked in the show notes. So wherever you are listening to this episode, you guys will be able to go and check out Jennifer's stuff. Make sure that you, especially if you have a business, I would really recommend trying out her mentorship page. Just see how you can elevate it. Jennifer, do you have anything, last things that you would say to the Sincerely Self audience?
I would just say that it gets to be fun, it gets to be simple, it gets to be easy. And just by tapping into the nature practices and the wheel of the year, you will get to experience that. That is possible for you.
Yes, I love it. It's just getting over the beliefs that you have.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, perfect. I will see you guys next week.